Hi Omnibot. How are you doing there? A YouTube content creator, channel crossover communication. Haven't had one of them in over a year. On screen.
Hey, it's me. Hi Mr. Jones. The great Mr. Jones. I am John H. Shelton. I'm a kaiju fan. I love Godzilla, Gamera. I've got my own YouTube channel and all that malarkey. And the question is I need to ask you, Mr. Jones, is on your channel, where is the kaiju?
It's a good point.
In college, I kind of started doing this Godzilla 1985 piece of artwork. It was a bit incomplete. I got a bit lazy, sorry about that. I'm glad you're not as lazy as me. But I know you like the film. I like the film Godzilla 1985. There's my figure. But here's my artwork from Godzilla 1985. I'd like to see you paint Godzilla 1985.
Hello, konnichiwa, and welcome to Vidorama, where we remember the VHS releases of the past in graphic detail. My name's Advon Jones. Yes, really. If you're new to the channel, I paint tributes to movie rentals of the past, and today I'll be painting a tribute to Godzilla 1985, released in 1985. As you can see, I've prepared the drawing beforehand and photocopied it to card for painting. Thank you to John for recommending this month's movie. I myself am a fan of kaiju movies, specifically Godzilla movies. It all started with the Hanna-Barbera cartoon series, and I look back on my days of taping late-night Godzilla movies off the TV with great fondness. As for Godzilla 1985, although it's not the first Godzilla movie I ever watched, it certainly is the first one I ever rented, and I loved it. Actually, I remember getting quite emotional at the end of this one. But anyway, enough rambling. Let's paint a tribute to Godzilla 1985. Actually, I should perhaps explain at this point, for those that don't know, kaiju is a Japanese genre of films and television shows that feature giant monsters. Godzilla, Gamera, Rodan, Mothra and the like. Right, following on from last month, many of you said that you like the addition of an extra colour to my palette, so today the colours I will be using are Mars Black, Titanium White, Lime Yellow and Sap Green. As usual, the fine detail is applied with pens. A big thank you to John for recommending this movie. I've known John for some years now. He's a great guy, passionate about kaiju movies. So if you are also that way inclined, I suggest you check out his channel. Okay, Godzilla 1985. There are actually two versions of this movie. The original Japanese version and an American version. And it's that version that this painting is devoted to. Although not as superior as the Japanese version, it still has its moments, and as I said before, I have a soft spot for it. This version is also often cited as the one responsible for getting many Westerners into the Godzilla franchise. The movie was first released in Japan in December 1984 under the title The Return of Godzilla. Released during Godzilla's 30th anniversary, it was actually Godzilla's 16th film, and it served as both a reboot of the franchise and acted as a direct sequel to the original 1954 film, ignoring all the subsequent movies and events that happened between. Godzilla was once again a destructive force, and just like Batman in the 80s, Godzilla returned to his dark roots. After its release in Japan, it was then released in America the following year, heavily re-edited with various subplots removed. Additional footage was added starring Raymond Burr. So if you have watched this movie and it starred Raymond Burr, then it's the American version you have seen. Now for some it might seem strange to find Raymond Burr in a Godzilla movie, but it really isn't. He already had an association with Godzilla. When the first Godzilla movie was released in America in 1956, under the title of Godzilla King of the Monsters, it too had been dubbed into English, re-edited, with some key plot points and themes removed, and new scenes added, and those scenes featured Raymond Burr. He was playing a character called Steve Martin, who was an American reporter that was documenting the monster's attack on Japan. And so Burr was actually reprising that role for this movie. Hope that makes sense. This version is a little different to the original. It's also shorter than the Japanese version, but I will attempt to give you the plot. A Japanese fishing vessel is caught in a storm and they witness a giant monster. And a few days later, a reporter, Goro Maki, finds the vessel intact, but all the crew but Hiroshi Okamura are dead. He tells Maki that Godzilla has returned. As Maki sets out to write the story for the paper, he is told that Godzilla's return is a national security risk, and so the article is withheld on the grounds that it could cause a panic. Meanwhile, Godzilla attacks and destroys a Soviet submarine in the Pacific. The Russians believe it to be the Americans attacking, and so this sparks off a diplomatic crisis and starts to raise fears of a nuclear war. The Japanese Prime Minister intervenes at this point, explaining that it was in fact Godzilla that attacked the sub, and makes a stance that nuclear weapons will not be allowed in Japanese territory, not even if Godzilla attacks. Sure enough, Godzilla attacks. He attacks a nuclear power plant and he feeds off the radiation before wandering off after a flock of birds towards Tokyo Bay. He comes ashore and does what he does best, stomps through Tokyo, causing panic and destruction. You know, even when I was sketching this, I wasn't sure if I wanted to include those jets. But now, having drawn them, I don't like them. So, let's paint them out. With that resolved, it's back to the plot. Godzilla strolls through Tokyo and battles the Super X attack plane. While all this is going on, Steve Martin is summoned to the Pentagon to assist against the Godzilla situation. The Russians fire their nuclear missile, and as it makes its way towards Japan, the Americans have to fire their missile to intercept it and prevent further disaster. It's full of Cold War conflict and conspiracy, nuclear missiles, volcanoes, electrical storms, a giant sea louse, and of course lots of giant monster mayhem. Good stuff. This was the first of 2 Godzilla movies that were made in the 1980s. Terror of Mechagodzilla, which had been released in 1975, hadn't performed as well in the box office, and so Toho decided it was time to start over. A colour remake of the original film was planned, presumably inspired by the success of Dino De Laurentiis' 1976 remake of King Kong, but for whatever reason the project was shelved. Godzilla's creator, Tomoyuki Tanaka, was put in charge of reviving the franchise in 1979, and he set out to return the series to its anti-nuclear roots, as he felt that subsequent generations of Japan had forgotten about the dangers of nuclear weapons. A draft story entitled The Resurrection of Godzilla was written by Akira Mirao in 1980, in which Godzilla dukes it out against a shape-shifting monster called Bagon, but the project was scrapped. It was around this time that America also expressed an interest in seeing more Godzilla. In 1983, Steve Miner, the director of Friday the 13th Part 2 and 3, and later House and Halloween H2O, acquired the rights to Godzilla. He wanted to make a stop-motion Godzilla movie. He hired Night of the Creeps and Monster Squad writer Fred Dekker to write a screenplay called Godzilla, King of the Monsters in 3D. Dekker was hired as he wasn't really a fan of the franchise, and so it was believed that he would write the script straight and not cheesy. His version played more like an action movie with a Cold War spy subplot. Despite a completed script and a storyboard drawn up by American fantasy artist William Stout, the project was ultimately dropped due to high budget costs, which was a real shame. Tanaka continued his efforts to get the Big G back up on the big screen, and he was adamant that this one should be a direct sequel to the 1954 movie, and he hired screenwriter Shinichi Nakahara to write the screenplay that combined elements from the previously scrapped Resurrection of Godzilla and the Godzilla King of the Monsters in 3D scripts. Original Godzilla director Ishiro Honda was approached to direct The Return of Godzilla, but he declined the offer, and so it was instead offered to Koji Hashimoto. He had previously served as an assistant director on such movies as King Kong vs. Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Frankenstein vs. Baragon, Invasion of the Astro Monsters, and All Monsters Attack, and so he was no stranger to Godzilla. The same could be said for the special effects director Teruyoshi Nakano. Having worked at Toho since 1959, his work had actually been singled out during the making of Mothra vs. Godzilla in 1964. He mentored under Ishii Tsuburaya, who is regarded as the father of special effects in Japan. Nakano was later promoted to first assistant director, and he worked on several movies including All Monsters Attack. But when Tsuburaya passed away in 1970, Nakano was eventually promoted to special effects director, and he worked on films such as Godzilla vs. Hedorah in 1971 and Godzilla vs. Gigan in 1972. So by the mid-70s he was the head of the special effects department at Toho. Now, I should mention that in my original concept I wanted to feature some of the cast in the lower corner of the painting to serve as a little nod to those wonderful Godzilla movie posters of the past. I thought I would feature the movie's romantic elements looking on in horror. Naoko Akamura was played by Yusuko Sawagachi, and in 1984 she was the winner of the first Toho Cinderella contest. She made her movie debut in Karate Cop 3 Song of the Sea before she was selected to play this role. She was also a singer. She performed the movie's tie-in song Goodbye Lover, which you can hear on the radio at the beginning of the movie. This wasn't her only association with Godzilla. She also worked on Godzilla vs. Biollante, which was released in 1989. She still works in movies and television. She was the voice of Chihiro's mother in Spirited Away. But as for Godzilla himself, he was given a slight redesign for this movie. They gave him back his ears and they wanted some sadness to the character, so they added sorrow to his eyes and gave him sloping shoulders. They also decided to increase his previous height of 160 feet to 260 feet, reflecting on how much the Tokyo skyline had changed in 30 years. They had hoped to build a full-scale replica of Godzilla, but they had to settle for a 16-foot high robotic version instead, which they called the Cybot, which they used for close-up shots of his face and facial expressions. But for the long shots they used the tried and tested method of having a performer dress up as Godzilla. The suit was originally constructed for stuntman Hiroshi Yamasaki, but he backed out at the last minute and so he was replaced by Kenshiro Satsuma, who had previously played Hedra and Gigan. So because of this, the measurements of the suit weren't quite right and he had to work in a suit that was too big for him. It was so hot in that suit that he requested that small holes be drilled in the fingers so that the sweat could pour out. He was only able to stand 10 minutes at a time in it, and he lost 12 pounds during filming. Can I just add at this point, if I've mispronounced anyone's names, I am truly sorry. Unfortunately, my desire to speak Japanese is far greater than my actual abilities. After its Japanese release, Toho offered this movie to all the major studios in Hollywood, but they turned it down. It was then offered to Roger Corman's New World Entertainment and they snapped it up. Working as head of post-production in New World Entertainment at the time was Tony Randall. He had worked as a film editor for Corman before working for New World Entertainment. Actually, after this film he would go on to be the production supervisor on Hellraiser before becoming a director in his own right, directing Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, Children of the Night and Ticks. He also directed television, working on such shows as the Power Rangers in Space and Joe Bob's Drive-In Theatre. But before all that, Randall was in charge of Americanizing the movie for a Western audience. This wasn't the first time that New World Pictures had done this. In 1975 they released Tidal Wave, another Japanese movie that had most of its footage cut and replaced with new sequences featuring Lauren Green. Randall, being a fan of Godzilla, he suggested that Raymond Burr be brought back for the new scenes, and it was also his idea to change the title to Godzilla 1985, having been inspired by the Boris Karloff movie Frankenstein 1970. The nuclear and political overtones that featured in the original Japanese version were removed and controversially changed somewhat. Most notably, the scene that has the Russian colonel dying trying to prevent the accidental missile launch was instead changed to having him deliberately launching the missile instead. They tightened up the action sequences and removed scenes that they thought made the movie look cheap, and so, for instance, the sea lice attack was shortened somewhat. It's worth noting, however, that Godzilla makes an appearance a lot sooner in this version. The sheet of paper that I sometimes apply to the painting, it's simply to make sure that I don't accidentally get paint on anything. It has been known to happen. But having made all the alterations, Randall then brought in first-time director R.J. Kaiser to direct the additional American footage. Kaiser had been working at New World since 1979 and had previously worked as an editor on such movies as Up From the Depths, Battle Beyond the Stars, Galaxy of Terror and Space Raiders. After Godzilla in 1985 he would then go on to direct Hell Comes to Frogtown, which was released in 1988. Kaiser shot the American segments in a studio over the course of 3 days. Raymond Burr was present for just one of those days, with the reverse shots of the other actors he was speaking to filmed the next day, and then on the third day they filmed in Malibu. Martin's grandson, who you see playing with the Tomy Zoidzilla, great toy by the way, I had that, was played by child star Justin Gok, who would later go on to play Al Lewis's grandson in Moonrise, aka My Grandpa is a Vampire. Check out my Moonrise tribute for more information on his career. Reportedly, the scripts for the American scenes were originally intended to be tongue-in-cheek, somewhat light-hearted. However, when Raymond Burr, who was fond of Godzilla and his association with the film, agreed to join the project, he made it quite clear that he wanted to uphold Godzilla's nuclear metaphor and would not dumb it down for laughs. And so he made changes to the script, rewriting most of his lines and completely rewrote his closing speech. Burr said that it wasn't the large amount of money that had persuaded him to appear in the film, it was because he relished the idea of being able to reprise a role that he had played 30 years before. It's also worth noting that in 1985, Raymond Burr also reprised the role that made him famous, Perry Mason, returning to screens in the Perry Mason Returns TV movie, which incidentally also provided additional publicity for this movie. The set consisted of 3 walls, and the shots of the view screen and the computer display was recycled from the movie Philadelphia Experiment. They also used footage from the original Godzilla. Some of the music was also recycled. New World added tracks from Christopher Young's score for Defcon 4, which would later cause copyright issues when it came to releasing this movie on home media. This version of the movie is also infamous for its product placements, most notably for Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper vending machine can be clearly seen in the hall of the Pentagon, and cans are being consumed by the characters throughout the film. Dr. Pepper already had negotiated the use of Godzilla from Toho for a campaign they were running when New World picked up the film distribution rights. And as Godzilla was already being linked with Dr. Pepper, New World offered to put the product in the movie for a piggyback ride on their ad campaign. Negotiations to have Raymond Burr drinking Dr. Pepper on screen did not get very far. When the movie was released in Japan, it did very well. It restarted the franchise and was followed by many sequels. In America, the studio went all out to promote it with various tie-in deals. There was the iconic Imperial Godzilla toy, and New World even released a music single, the love theme from Godzilla 1985, I Was Afraid to Love You by Jill Elliott. But despite all the love, Godzilla 1985 didn't quite match the success it achieved in Japan. But the movie wasn't a flop, it proved profitable for New World, more so when the movie was released on video. Godzilla 1985 would be the last film produced by Toho to be distributed theatrically in the United States, until the release of Godzilla 2000. And before that, of course, America did have a go at making its own Godzilla movie in 1998. But that's a story for another day. Well, that was fun, I enjoyed that. I'll just finish off by adding my signature. Thank you for joining me today and keeping me company. As ever, I hope that was of interest and that you like the finished painting. If so, perhaps you'll give this video a thumbs up or even consider subscribing. There are many more movie tribute paintings to be found on this channel, with many more on the way. Thank you to John for recommending the movie. Be sure to check out his channel, you'll find a link to it in the description. Thank you to everybody that has been liking the videos and sharing the videos. Your support is amazing. If you'd like to help the channel out further, you can check out the Patreon page. There are many goodies to be found there. And we also have a Etsy store where you can get prints, t-shirts, stickers and so forth. It all helps to fund this project. So let's cut to a shot of the finished painting, and I'll see you next time. Good night out there, whatever you are.